Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about the return of political turmoil to Bangladesh. There are protests everywhere. People are again unhappy with the current government. All the promises that the government had made after August overturn of Sheikh Hasina's government and after her departure, the hope, the optimism, the excitement of a new regime, a new government, a new country, all of that has been replaced by hopelessness, anger, and frustration at the slow pace of reform and the general economic decline that Bangladesh has experienced since the removal of Sheikh Hasina. So, so for example, there are protests in early May. They're called the Shahbag protests, organized by the National Citizens Party. This is a party that has emerged and constituted by mostly the students who were part of the protest movement last year in August. It is actually quite an improvement if you look at the inability of the Egyptian students and liberals to organize after the Arab Spring, which allowed the Muslim Brotherhood to completely dominate the Egyptian political scene. At least the students here in Bangladesh seem to have organized and they have a national citizen party. So they were protesting and demanding that Awami League, Sheikh Hasina's party, be prosecuted and banned. And they more or less got their wish. So the Muhammad Yunus advised government then basically used terrorism laws to basically suspend Awami League. It is interesting that one of the reforms that is supposed to come about in Bangladesh is to reform this particular law, which was used by, in a very oppressive fashion, by Sheikh Hasina herself. So anyway, there were protests by the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which wants to have early elections. They believe that the opportunity that BNP now has as a result of the banning of Awami League could be lost if the elections were delayed. And then, of course, the Hifadat Islam rally, which basically opposes the proposed changes in the Bangladeshi constitution, which puts men and women on the same footing. What is interesting is that the Muhammad Yunus government has proposed a rather loose timeline and says that they need until June 2026. That's when they plan to have elections, which is about 13 months from now, or at least little more than a year. And that is making the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party a bit uneasy. Much can happen in 1 year. As you can see, in 9 months itself, Bangladesh is experiencing two political turmoils. I mean, the protests and the chaos in Bangladeshi elections had reached such a point that Muhammad Yunus was threatening to resign as the advisor to the current government, which would have caused further chaos and further disrupted the process of reform and rebuilding and progress towards democratization. So basically, he's blackmailing his own country and the interim government to keep him in charge. And all of this within just 9 months. So a lot can happen in 1 year from now. In order to really understand fully what the tensions are all about, it's basically that there are too many political forces in Bangladesh, which are not all aligned, obviously, on the same page, and they are tugging at Bangladesh from different directions. I will draw the map of the different forces in Bangladesh shortly for you. But I also want to talk about the fact that there was lots of hope from this current government, which is more or less led by Muhammad Yunus, this interim government, which promised political change, reforms, end of corruptions, and democratization. They promised economic well-being to everybody, the sharing of resources, which were kind of concentrated among Awami League supporters. They felt that the fruits of the growing Bangladesh economy would be shared widely. So there was lots of promises of economic reform, political reform, constitutional reform. One of the reasons why students had started protesting was the kind of affirmative action policies that were used by the Sheikh Hasina government, once again, to benefit people who were part of her political system. And so all of those things needed to be reformed. The country had become very corrupt, and Muhammad Yunus had promised to end corruption too. None of that thing has fully happened. There is some progress, and so for example, Muhammad Yunus started. These are the initiatives that he has so far taken. He's promised institutional and legal reforms. So he's established 11 reform commissions targeting judiciary reform, police reform, public administration, anti-corruption, and constitutional reforms. So they formed a constitutional reform commission to draft a new inclusive constitution. I think the draft is ready, but the government is unable to implement many of these drafts. For example, there is protest by Hifazat-e-Islam, which opposes the inclusiveness of the constitution that is proposed. And there are anti-corruption and accountability measures, and they have formed a commission to investigate and enforce disappearance. So some of the so-called reforms are not actually reforms; they are an attempt to go after Sheikh Hasina and her political allies, and those who benefited financially through corruption under her rule. So some of these commissions are at essentially accountability, if you want to give it some kind of legitimacy, or basically political revenge. And some of them are genuinely reforms. So, for example, uh, one of the things that I like is the proposal for digital and civil liberties. They recognize the internet access as a civil right, which is something very interesting, which means that if you don't have internet access in your province, you can sue the government for violating your rights. So they recognize internet access as a civil right, repeal key provisions of the 2023 Cybersecurity Act to enhance digital freedoms. So I'm assuming that there will be no, so Bangladesh will not be like India, where my channel, my this channel that you're watching me on, is blocked. So it'll be more democratic, and we'll have more freedom of speech and more freedom of access to the internet than even the mother of democracy. I don't know whether that is true. If you're from Bangladesh and if you know of any channels, I'm assuming that any channel that is pro Awami League would be in trouble. So let me know how shall we say honestly the Yunus government is adhering to the reforms it is proposing. Then, of course, the big ones are the electoral and governance reforms and economic and administrative reforms. I'm really not interested in the details of those reforms, but clearly those reforms have not yet even been implemented or started. I don't know whether the commissions have come up with their reports. So, but you get the idea that there's a big agenda, a very broad agenda to completely redesign Bangladesh from the constitution onwards. Very little has changed in Bangladesh, and therefore it is but natural that people are unhappy and angry and frustrated. If the economy was doing better, then they would be willing to wait. But since the economy is also not doing better, in fact, there is a decline in the economic performance of Bangladesh in the last 9 months, I think people are therefore very, very angry. This issue of Muhammad Yunus quitting also happened because of the tensions between the army and Muhammad Yunus. But before I get into that, let me remind you that if you have not already subscribed to Khanversations, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your social political network. Khanversation is now eligible for super thanks and super chats. You're most welcome to indulge in that. And please try to become a member of Khanversation so you can support the channel. I have monthly Zoom meetings with members and listen to their suggestions and their advice, not just on topics, but also on the structure of the program. So basically, if you look at the political map of Bangladesh, right now there are probably, you could say there are five forces. The forces that brought about the basic opposition to Sheikh Hasina, the students and their partners. Uh, you could put them under the umbrella of the National Citizenship Party led by Naid Islam, NCP. Then you have the old political party, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP. Uh, Khalida Zia's political party, which now stands to become the most prominent, shall we say, secular party that could win elections across the board in the absence of Awami League. Then, of course, there is the Islamic party, the Jamaat Islami, which is very prominent, currently allied with the army and the government and supporting Muhammad Yunus. So, in many ways, Muhammad Yunus has a coalition that is backing him, and therefore, either the secularists or the Islamists are upset by the new proposals in the constitution, which becomes it very difficult for, I guess, for Muhammad Yunus to achieve consensus and move forward. Clearly, Islamic forces in Bangladesh see this as an opportunity to take Bangladesh more towards an Islamist direction, make it an Islamic state, establish the Sharia, impose the Sharia on minorities and women and others, and make it like another Taliban state, perhaps. That must be their goal. And then there are the secularists who are also corrupt. So I'm not very sure what is exciting them, this opportunity to rebuild a highly inclusive, secular, liberal, democratic Bangladesh, or come to power and loot it. I really don't know what motivates the BNP. And then you have the Awami League and its supporters. They have been suspended, which means they cannot formally participate in the political process. That doesn't mean that they go away. It just means that they will go on the streets and they will cause more trouble than they were so far. And then finally, you have the army, and the army has clearly said that they are not going to interfere in the politics. But one of the things that Muhammad Yunus has done in the past 9 months, which was not supposed to be on his agenda and which he did not promise, is a lot of international intrigue. All the geopolitics that Muhammad Yunus has been indulging it, not necessarily to the advantage of Bangladesh, has also now pissed off the army and their general, Waqar Zama. I think his name is Waqar Zaman, but they call him Waqar Zaman. Anyway, I don't know how it's pronounced in Bangladesh, but I'll stick to Waqar Zaman, like Waqar Yunus. Oh, that would be interesting. Waqar Yunus, the fast bowler of Pakistan, has the first name of Waqar Zaman and the last name of Muhammad Yunus. Anyway, cricket always distracts me first. I'm sorry for that. So forces that and the army. So basically, the army has been ticked off by a proposal from the from the United Nations that Bangladesh has agreed to create a kind of a humanitarian corridor between Bangladesh and the Rakhine state of Myanmar. Ostensibly, this is to help the United Nations provide aid to those who are suffering oppression in the Rakhine state, the Rohingyas who have migrated to Bangladesh. There are about 1 million of them in Bangladesh. But a lot of people feel that this is another attempt by the United States to interfere in the regional geopolitics. So there are those who feel that under the cover of the UN or at the behest of the United States, the UN has done this, that the US is trying to get into a very strategic location, which will allow the US, assuming that they bring in US forces. Already there is a Rakhine Rohingya army there, a military force which is quite well armed. And if the United States also gets there, it's going to complicate the matter. The army is worried that Muhammad Yunus is making Bangladesh the battleground for superpowers. So it will be essentially the US will be there not to help the Rohingyas against their various enemies in Myanmar, but there to essentially balance and push China back. So what has happened in Muhammad Yunus's last 9 months is that he has made Bangladesh the battleground for regional and global politics. So one of the big things changes he has made is completely reformed Pakistan-Bangladesh relations. Now the security measures which are in place are all down. Pakistan is all over Bangladesh. Pakistani intelligence people are there. There seems to be a lot of military cooperation that is freaking India out. So you have this triangle where Bangladesh is now very, very active. Given the India-Pakistan tensions, Bangladesh is clearly taking sides here. Bangladesh is economically and culturally highly integrated with India, far more than Pakistan. Yet it is choosing in Pakistan over Bangladesh, and it is hurting its own interests. As you can see, that India is now banning exports from Bangladesh to India. India is also preventing a lot of raw material going into Bangladesh, which also hurts India because Bangladesh is now becoming more and more dependent on China. So that is the second triangle where Bangladesh is now also becoming a playground for not just Pakistan, India tensions, but India China tensions. Yunus's last trip to China, where he talked about cutting off the seven northeastern states of India and calling them landlocked, has created a huge sense of a security dilemma for India, which is worries about the so-called Siliguri corridor, which could, if controlled by China, would really cut off northeastern part of India from the rest of India. That's the second geopolitical game that Yunus is playing between India, China, with India and China, and the third with this whole Rakhine state humanitarian corridor. Uh, Yunus was now getting involved in the global geopolitics and tensions between US and China. And that is probably what has ticked off Waqar al-Zaman, who says, look, you are compromising the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bangladesh, and I will not stand for that. Because he didn't even know that Yunus and his foreign minister Tawheed had agreed to this with the UN and ostensibly with the US. So now Muhammad Yunus walked it back, at least on this issue. But the point, I think the general is right, and I'm with him on this, that the job of Muhammad Yunus's government is to precipitate domestic reforms, undermine corruption, make the constitution and society more inclusive, make sure that everybody benefits from the economic growth of Bangladesh, to end what I should call biased distribution of state privileges, and create a system which allows meritocracy to rise up. And then, of course, eliminate all the barriers to a fair and free election and make Bangladesh more democratic. That is his mandate. That is what he should stick to, rather than getting involved in international intrigue, which people feel he's doing so in order to extend his own stay beyond even June 2026. It is possible that Muhammad Yunus might join the NCP and try to come back as prime minister. He should do that if he wants to continue to rule Bangladesh, but win a mandate. He has no mandate. If he believes in democracy, he should recognize that he does not have a mandate. And he's making big changes in Bangladesh. What they need to do is to have all these proposals for reform ready, have fair and free elections, and then let an elected government institute those reforms, or at least put all of those reforms on the referendum when they have elections. The army wants election by December, and so does the BNP. And I think he should do that. There is enough time to hold an election. There are 7 more months left. So I hope you found this brief discussion of the political turmoil in Bangladesh. If Yunus does not change his ways, I suspect that Bangladesh will become ungovernable and extremely chaotic. So I hope his sense prevails and personal egos are put in the back drawer. And Bangladesh moves forward towards reform and democratization and development. So I hope you found this brief discussion interesting. So subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, like this video, and share it with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Take care.